Sorry, the mic wasn't plugged in. So, hello everybody. Welcome to another Sunday. Let's just begin with the addresses here. This is where you can go to get today's soundtrack. Sleep, Awake, Awakened. And here's where you can get that out there. This is where you go to make comments or ask questions about anything to do with these live streams. Scientific Sound / ask a question. And this is where you go to my YouTube channel, where you can see all the previous live streams all the way back to April 5th of last year. Coming up soon on the 1 year mark of doing these live streams. Yeah. Unbelievable, really. So, as we had been talking previously, the last time, the last two times, we were talking about the senses and the fact that once again we're fooled into believing who told us what was so, instead of digging deeper to find out or having personal experiences that change our viewpoint of what we've been taught. First of all, we're taught a basic thing, that there are things. Universe is made of things, and each of those things has a name, all the way down to the smallest particle you can measure or find, to the largest superstructure in the universe that you can possibly see or measure. Everything has to have a name. Human beings are the naming creatures. We don't go completely off the edge. We go close to it. For instance, I have 50,000 protein strands coming off the top of my head. We call them hair. And the hair, when you do the anatomy search of the hair is made of protein follicle, protein strand, and it goes into a follicle, and the follicle's got little organelles and all kinds of little things in it. Each one of those has a name. But we don't name every single one of our hairs. I guess I could. This hair right here is Fred, and that's Alice, and that's Dimitri. But but I can conceive, yeah, we might go that far if it necessitated it from a scientific survey to, do some experiment with a patch of my scalp with 100 hairs, and we had to do different experiments on each hair. Then each hair would be assigned a name or a number or some kind of thing. But anyway, we name things, and then we believe that they're separate from each other because they've got different names, and we divide the universe up into an infinite number of named pieces, and then believe that all those pieces are separate from each other, and that gives us our worldview. I name this total envelope that I've got here as my body. But the only reason that I can see my body is because of the space around it, and the space around it has a name, the space around it, but the space around it is tended because I can't see it. It has no value. It's not actually there, but we know that's not true. That the space around my body is just there as the body itself. It's only a trick of my perceptual mode of my eyeballs that are tuned to a very extremely narrow frequency of angstrom frequencies in the total electromagnetic spectrum that we call color. The same thing with hearing. The only reason I can see is because of the limitation of my eyesight, and the only reason I can hear is because of the limitation of my hearing. I can only hear frequencies between 20 and 20,000 hertz. Everything above and below that is invisible to my hearing. Therefore, I think it's not there. Not true. It's just as there as the sound waves. I just can't pick it up with this mechanism I invented to measure a narrow little bandwidth. Same thing with touch. The only reason I can touch something and get that sensation is because I have ranges outside my touch that I can't touch, that I can't feel. The only reason I can think is because of the limitation of my thinking. I can only think in terms of definitions of opposites, good and bad, right and left, light and dark, me and not me, space and space around it, body and space around it, male, female, good, bad, right, left, up, down. All of those complementary definition factors is what my mind depends on in order to define something. And defining something means I have to be able to locate it in, say, three-dimensional space and walk around it and analyze it from every angle so it can be defined. A defining area around something so it's in its place. That means that concepts like infinity begin to confound my mind. I can no longer conceive of infinity because it would require something that is non-infinite to be a space around infinity. And by definition, infinity goes forever and has no space around it. So that becomes impossible for the brain to calculate an infinite value. And we see that in science all the time. Science is constantly working things out in how the universe works with mathematical values. And again and again and again and again, mathematical descriptions of the nature of reality tend to end up drifting into infinitudes, where the numbers crunch off to infinity and never end where you can define something. And so those values are what's called rectified. In mathematics, you rectify those infinitude numbers and tweak them slightly so they come to an end, so that it can fit into your nice little box of definitions that the universe is made of finite things that you can walk around and define, so they fit into your mathematical formulas correctly. And of course, that's gotten us into all kinds of trouble as time has gone on, because we have only truly an approximate view of the universe that fits into our predefined definition of the universe, that is an infinite number of finite things, and each can have a name. We discussed a bit of that with Terence Witt, his book called The Null Universe, where this is what nothing looks like, that there's simple zero and complex zero is all the mathematical relationships of zero to itself that sums to zero, or subtracts, or divides, or square roots, or whatever. And the only difference between the two is the relationship of zero to itself, and that relationship is something that pops out of nothing, and that's this. This is just relationships between opposites, like I've been saying. If there's no relationships between opposites, it's an infinite value. And if my eyes could expand that narrow vibrational range that it's sensitive to, of angstrom frequencies of color, expand it out beyond the lowest and the highest, and keep going forever until I could encompass seeing all frequency ranges that there are, then I would see nothing. It would all explode into white light. It would all explode into nothing with no complementary to give my eyes some reference point to segment something out with, quote, a space around it so that I could see colors. Same with hearing. If I could hear everything, I would hear nothing. But that falls along with Terence Witt, because if I could, see everything or hear everything, I would see and hear nothing, and nothing is what this is all made of. So it's one of those Zen curlicues at the end of reality. It's like a Baroque. Anyway, if we go back to what we were talking about last time, where I identified all these different senses, aside from just the 5 senses that we've been taught, in school, where the regular ones like seeing and tasting and touching and hearing and smelling, taste is also closely linked with the sense of smell and the sense of chemoreception, which is down here, number 12. Chemoreception throughout the body to monitor hormone levels and toxins and food groups and allergies and medicines and stuff like that. We identify what things are, and we have chemoreception throughout our body in order to monitor biochemistry that comes from the organs and glands. Organs and glands are like little factories that produce something, and we need to analyze what's coming out of that factory with chemoreception. But our sense, and the sense of smell, it's the most primitive sense we have, an area in the lower brainstem called the rhinencephalon, which means the nose brain. So the most number one primitive sense we have is this sense of smell thing. 3D equilibrium, the semicircular canals, and a host of other things where I talked about the three levels of organizing our sense of 3D space, the eyes and the TMJ and the inner ear semicircular canals. But we will also see that these link into proprioception receptors, which are made up of mechanoreceptors, stretch receptors, Golgi tendon bundles, nerve bundles in the tendons that give stretch compression information to the brain. Nociception, which is pain, heat, cold, hunger, thirst. Magnetoreception, we talked about magnetite crystals in the brain, nose, eyes. Time and space perception. These two are closely associated with the default mode network, which I've discussed before, where I get my sense of myself inside my skin versus outside my skin, and my sense of time, past to the present, present into the future. And then we've got ESP, psychic, intuition, precognition. I talked about the experiments we did at CHS for precognitive excuse me, ability and how to boost that, where we used epsilon brainwave entrainment, which tended to be what was associated with people's experiences in my clinic when I saw them exhibiting sort of below delta brain activity, which I eventually called epsilon. And in every single case, this was associated with out-of-the-body experiences, psychic abilities, precognition, spiritual insights. We discussed pattern recognition, cosmic pattern recognitions, empathy, the perception of experiencing another person's emotions through your emotions, not just an intellectual observation. Life force perception, which I had talked about before, where, for instance, my first instance of that was in a dissection lab where we zipped open the black bag and I saw a dead body there and experienced a sense of mine whose sole purpose is to sense life in something else. And self-perception, self with a capital S. Perception of myself, my big self, versus my small self, who I think I am. The sort of networking of all of these different kind of senses in a grand design of how the brain oversees all of these different systems and how they weave and link in together, where we, for instance, our sense of me in three-dimensional space is relying on my semicircular canals and my eyes and my TMJ, mechanoreceptors through all my joints, and stretch receptors in my muscles, and Golgi tendon stretch and compression receptors in the tendons of all those muscles. So the body is an unimaginably complex and infinitely detailed network of sensors spread throughout the system. Pain and heat and cold and pressure and touch and vibration and position sense, that's proprioception, and semicircular canals and eyeballs and all the rest of it, all working together in some massive, unbelievable quantum programming under the hood that is constantly giving me data about what's so. Am I being threatened? Where am I in three-dimensional space? We also sort of saw that there are all these brainwave frequencies that we have uncovered here at Center for Neuroacoustic Research, where when I went to school it was beta, alpha, theta, and delta, and that's pretty much the nomenclature even to today, except they've added gamma. They've ignored hypergamma and lambda, even though this was in the same original research report where they first reported noticing gamma at 40 hertz. They also noticed 100 and 200 hertz activity, but nobody ever followed up on that, and there hasn't been a word about any of this up here since that original day back in the late 80s when gamma was first discovered. So it was, I think, only me and here at CNR that has been exploring these extremely high focus states for super high states of meditation. Well, we're the first ones to put out a gamma meditation soundtrack. I was the first to use gamma clinically back in the 90s. But we see that we have these borderline states I had talked about, the borderline between beta and alpha, alpha, theta, theta, delta, delta, epsilon. There's also between beta and gamma, which I didn't put on here. And then below delta, these frequencies I discovered in 1988-89, epsilon 1 and 2, which are slower than the lowest brain frequency that tends to be identified. And then below that, I had been working with these for years, 10, 12, 15 years before default mode network was discovered in 2001. And these are my current experimental frequencies in extremely deep states below default mode network that we've been doing currently. So there's always more than it appears to be. One thing that I started to notice early on when I started hooking up every patient to EEG and sending them homes with these custom-made soundtracks to listen to that entrained brain waves and balance the nervous system and stuff like that, was that in sleep research, when I'm dropping off to sleep in alpha, so beta is out here awake, I'm first slowing my brain waves down, getting more relaxed, and it crosses over that first border of beta alpha and goes into alpha. A different waveform actually shows up, aside from the fact that it's a little slower. Beta at 15, 14, 13, the borderline, 12, 11. So someplace around 13 something happens and a new waveform shows up in the brain, and we call it alpha. And it is slower than 14, below 13, 13 and below, but it also looks different. A program switches in the brain. And then that goes down and down until it hits theta, the borderline of theta, at around 7 or 8. And a new waveform shows up that we call theta, and that's where dreaming sleep takes place. And then it goes deeper and deeper. The dream material gets deeper and deeper. We go deeper into the unconscious material, where we start to actually work and heal traumas at an unconscious level. Superficial theta dreaming is more of rehashing the day's stuff and cleaning a house. But we go to another borderline at the lowest range of theta, where we reach the theta delta borderline and cross into delta, where a new waveform shows up that's high amplitude, very slow frequencies, and I am deepest asleep I can be. Lowest heart rate, respiration, body temperature, metabolic processes. That's where the physical body is healing itself for the next day. And that's the portion of sleep that tends to get missing in what we have now as a global epidemic of inability to sleep due to stress. Running stress response all the time, and the autonomic nervous system makes the body reluctant to want to go to the deepest stage of sleep, where I'm most vulnerable and most difficult to wake up. So I trash that and don't get that anymore. It's just when I need it the most to rebuild my body, because I'm burning up all my resources, because my sympathetic nervous system is on all the time running a fight or flight response. But one thing I noticed is that if you're in mid-range theta, in dreaming sleep, let's say at 5 hertz theta, and we teleport you sort of into the middle of your day, and have exactly the same brainwave frequency, you're not experiencing dreaming anymore. You might call that daydreaming, but it's also a normal function of how my brain works when I use my memory. So if I ask you to remember what you had for breakfast, your brain will play a little movie of you making breakfast or eating breakfast or whatever. Memory is a series of little movies that my brain replays, and in order to do that, a section of my brain goes over here, generates theta waves, and it slows down and generates theta waves and opens the specific theta frequency that opens the door to long-term memory. And then I play that little movie. So we start to see that there is this, if I'm asleep and I'm generating this 5 hertz theta, and that's a dream, if I teleport into my day and I have the same brainwave frequency going, it's incorporated properly into the continuum of my experience, because it's synchronized into what I know how my brain works. I mean, it's not surprising to me if I remember, what we did at lunch yesterday, like this picture. We'll play this little movie of sitting at the table doing whatever we were doing at that time, and because that's synchronized in my brain, it's not surprising to me, and I'm not shocked by the fact that a little movie is playing of a memory. And the point I'm trying to make is that there's the same brain state, the same brainwave pattern of 5 hertz theta can have a variety of different meanings, which is all set by the context, and it goes deeper than that. The context of laying in my bed on my pillow and turning the light out. This position tells my body I should be running the sleep program, and all the brain frequencies I'm going to experience will be in the context of sleep. Therefore, I'm running the sleep program, and all these brain frequencies have a sleep meaning, a meaning of healing my mind and my emotions and my physical body for the next day. But here I can have the same exact brain frequencies in alpha and theta and delta, but they no longer have a sleep context. They have a different context that, even though it's the same brainwave frequency, exactly the experience I have is completely transformed and different by my context. And it's, like I'm saying, it's beyond the context. It's the body positioning. So here in sleep, my body position is horizontal, laying on a pillow in a bed with covers on me and the lights out. So all of those factors are the anchors that tell my brain, that confirm to me that this must be the sleep program. Here, there's no bed, I'm not horizontal, I'm upright, and I'm engaged in my day with a lot of beta activity. But as I said before, there's no such thing as a beta state or an alpha state or a theta state. It's a conglomeration of all the brain frequencies and different amplitude relationships to each other that form an overall pattern where the biggest, highest amplitude might be beta, and all the alpha, theta, and delta amplitudes are very low. So we could call this in general a beta state. But it's actually the whole mix of the pattern that forms my state of consciousness, not just one frequency. So this upright position, engaged in my day, is signaling my brain that the brain activity in my brain now has another meaning, aside from a sleep meaning. And we carry that one step more. If I meditate, as soon as I put my legs in this cross position and sit on a pillow that forces my spine to get straight and I close my eyes, now, even though I've got my eyes closed, which is normally associated with sleep, it has a new meaning because my body positioning, I don't have any external cues anymore. All I have is internal cues to tell me that this is not a sleep program and it's not the waking program. So that's why I entitled this Sleep, Waking, and Awakening. And what sets the tone for all of these is a body positioning. And it particularly is more and more important body positioning when I'm sitting and meditating with my eyes closed, because all the external cues are missing. All of these external cues of everything is missing. And it's my body positioning sensors spread throughout my muscles and in my joints, my proprioception ability, with mechanoreceptors and stretch receptors and Golgi tendon receptors in my joints and muscles that are giving my body position information to my brain. And that's working with the semicircular canals and the TMJ. My eyes are out of action. Those are synchronizing up with all of these, which is giving data information to the deep levels of my brain, and it's calculating out where I am in three-dimensional space and what my hands are doing. So in general, this is what I call a full body mudra. And a mudra is generally looked upon as hand positionings, esoteric positionings of the hands that appear to have deep meaning in Eastern esoteric societies. And this is old stuff all the way back to China, where they also had these mudras, hand positions, and each hand position has some meaning of what it does to you, how it changes your state of consciousness or tweaks emotions. Or this is one page of many, 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 many pages that I saw when I started looking all this up. Hundreds of different hand positions that have meaning. And so this is generally what we think of as a mudra. For those of us who even know what a mudra is. And it gets all kinds of different mudras, and there's certain types of mudras for different types of meditations, different types of meditation positions. This whole idea that specific touching of various fingers together and hand positioning has some kind of deep meaning. They have names. I'm going to go down that path because this goes on forever. There's hundreds of these specific types of Sanskrit names that point out specific types of hand positions that cause all kinds of different things to happen in your emotions, in your mind, in your body, for healing, for waking up, for relaxing. Fascinating. More and more and more of these. This one is for calmness and acceptance, concentration, intuition. I don't know. It goes on and on and on. So do a Google search of mudras, and you can see what the meanings of all these are. And these are ancient. It's been around for a long time. Very interesting stuff. But what I'm talking about is something bigger and more inclusive than that. And that is what I call the full body mudra. So in the full body mudra, it's the fact that my whole body is horizontal and I'm getting quiescent, I'm laying in bed. That full body positioning is signaling my brain, this must be the sleep program, and now all the brainwave frequencies have a new experience for me as consciousness. And part of that positioning is all of these stretch receptors and mechanoreceptors and tendon receptors and semicircular canals working together so that I can get a position sense of myself in space, even if my eyes are closed. So one of the big tests for this property of the brain of proprioception, to test for neurological conditions where that starts to break down, is the idea of closing your eyes and touching your index finger to the tip of your nose. And the fact that I can do that I can take my hand, position in space with no visual cues, and touch the tip of my nose is mind-blowing. When I was going to school and we learned all the unimaginable things that have to take place in the brain, sending motor signals and receiving sensory signals from stretch receptors and mechanoreceptors in my joints so that my arm can come up and I know it's exactly horizontal to the ground, and then I can move this part of my arm around, and receptors in my elbows and my muscles and my tendons are telling my brain what three-dimensional position this is in, and then I can close these, extend this, and stretch receptors and mechanoreceptors in all these joints and muscles and tendons are signaling my brain that my fingers actually did do what I ordered them to do. So motor sensation comes down to all the muscles here, tells them to contract themselves like this. Stretch receptors, mechanoreceptors send signals back to the sensory cortex that tells my brain, hey, I just did what you told me to do. And now I'm going to direct this XYZ coordinate at the tip of my finger, and I'm going to place it on this XYZ coordinate that is all in my brain as a pre-calculated picture of my environment. I know precisely where my fingertip is and where my nose is in a three-dimensional matrix of data points in 3 dimensions. So I know that I have to bring it over to here to touch, even with my eyes closed. No matter where this thing is, where I can change these XY coordinates, I can touch my nose. Or I can direct my hand to grab a glass and bring the glass up to my mouth and actually hit my mouth and not hit my forehead and not miss my face, and actually do this activity that seems unconscious. You don't even think about it, but it's a miracle of calculations in the brain that involves thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of sensors throughout my body in order to do the simplest act of touching the tip of my nose with my finger. And in particular, to do that with my eyes closed, this is pretty mind-boggling. The idea that I can know where my body is because of all these millions of sensors spread throughout there, crunching numbers under the hood, is the mechanism that I'm talking about of the full body mudra. The full body positioning and the context of my three-dimensional space where I am that gives my brain the data it needs to know in order to reinterpret what the same brain frequency means as a conscious experience, whether I'm sleeping or in my day or meditating. Same brain frequency, completely different meaning of that brain frequency. So that means we get at least triple duty out of each brain frequency the brain can generate. In beta, alpha, theta, delta, gamma, epsilon, all of those have three different meanings. One, what happens when I'm sleeping? Two, what happens when I'm out here in the world, quote, awake, with a small w? And three, what happens in my awakening state when I meditate? This idea of proprioception, and I'm sure many of you are trying this right now to close your eyes and see if you can touch the tip of your nose. And of course, you can do it. It's just, how the hell are you doing that? How are you doing that? Can you feel it from the inside out, how you're doing that? No, you do it so easily because you grew up figuring it out when you're a fetus, when you're a baby. Babies are crawling around. I mean, when a baby is first born, all it does is lay there, and it kind of makes faces and moves its eyes around, and his arms and legs are kind of moving around, and pretty soon it starts to get its act together, and it can kind of touch its face. It's getting it. It's like somebody inside the brain, there's this, little entity in there with a big giant control panel with buttons and switches and levers, and it's kind of going, oh, what happens if I pull that lever and the hand moves? And what if I push that button, the foot moves? And what if I do this? And and what if I do these two together? Then, and I bet you if I did those and those and those together, I could move my hand and touch my nose. And you learn that and learn that and learn that until it's now second nature. It's muscle memory. I don't even have to think about it anymore. It's smoothly done because I've got all those neural pathways burned. And here we are. Major proprioceptive receptors. These Golgi tendon apparatus is little stretch and compression receptors in the tendons, in the muscle bellies, and inside the joints, mechanoreceptors inside the joints. As a chiropractor, it's well recognized in the chiropractic profession that making chiropractic adjustments to the vertebra in your spine, or extremity adjusting your wrist for carpal tunnel syndrome or something, or adjusting your ankle or your knee, all of those, one aspect of what's going on there is a reset of the mechanoreceptors inside the joint tissue and the tendon receptors and the muscle belly receptors. We're resetting those so that the correct positioning of the elbow, because when it's not lined up properly and it's got pain, the nociception, pain sense, is alerting my brain that mechanoreceptors are not agreeing. They're signaling some problem is here. It's not lined up properly. And so when I adjust all that back together and reset all of the mechanoreceptors and the stretch receptors in the muscles and the tendons, and they all agree now, that pathway is cleared. And when it's in the spine, the spinal cord comes down, two nerve roots come out at each spinal level. And so with the spinal vertebra is not lined up properly, mechanoreceptors and muscle receptors and all the rest are firing off. And the nerve is being tractioned so that the signal coming down the brain to the spinal cord, out that nerve root to supply the organs and glands and whatever, is a snowy signal. It's not a 100% clear signal. It's a bad reception. Therefore, the system that is controlled is not getting a full signal. It can't possibly function properly because it's not getting clear directions from the brain, so it's guessing. The guesses are always a certain percent wrong. They can't be 100% right just with a guess. And the system starts to malfunction. So that's chiropractic. In a nutshell, is clear the pathways of communication between the brain and the nerve network that tells all the systems what to do and gets information from them that tells the brain, hey, I just did what you told me to do. So we pick this apart, and once again, we are in the matrix of an unimaginable level of detail, all the way down to an atomic level of receptors spread throughout the system. Muscle spindles, Golgi tendon apparatuses, all of these different ones that I talked about before, which have to do with vibration sense. These sensors that are connected into the skin cells that communicate to the posterior vibration sense pathways. And these are all working together with the semicircular canals and the visual network, and it's unimaginably complex of how many systems are working together just to touch my finger to the tip of my nose. There have been thousands of scientific research into these receptors spread throughout the body, even mapping out how many receptors per square centimeter are in various parts of the body. This is a micro photograph of some of these mechanoreceptors, and they're not spread equally throughout the body. The body will tend to have more and more receptors in the areas that are most refined, like the hand and the fingertips in particular, the lips, the face. Certain areas are extremely important to have huge numbers of mechanoreceptors, so that because I use those with much more fine detail. So the most will be in fingertips and lips and tongue and face. The least will be someplace in the middle of your back. For instance, fingertips and tongue, 100 mechanoreceptors per centimeter squared. A centimeter is very small. The back of your hand has less than 10. Your fingertip has 10 times more. That is actually that knowledge, because I illustrated all this when I was in chiropractic school. I illustrated these, so I know them well, and because of that information, I know that nerve networks in your back and your legs guides me in the placement of the transducers in my sound table and sound chair, which is why my sound tables and sound chairs are the best in the world. Nobody can touch what I'm doing with these, because I'm using science and anatomy and physiology knowledge for exact placement of transducers. So like for instance, here the transducers are under your low back and under the lower part of your leg. If I move these up a little bit and they're in the wrong place, then they're in areas of the back where the nerve distribution of the receptors are so spare that you're not sensing a lot of vibration if these are placed incorrectly. You don't want them way up here. You want them right here where we have a maximum of nerve networks for sensing the vibration. Same here. Up here at the top of the back of the thigh, the nerve distribution is not very good. But down here by the knee, it's rich. So if I place a transducer down here, as opposed to up a few inches, your perception is your whole leg is vibrating if I place this correctly. If I place it here correctly, your sensation is that the whole system right here is vibrating. But if I move them up a few inches, all that disappears. I just feel a hot spot under my back. And if I move it up too far, I'm in the lung field, and vibrational pounding into my lung field actually causes a stress response because it interferes with the network of cardiovascular and respiratory function. It messes up the synchronicity of heart and breathing to have pounding into the lung field. So we don't want them up there, we want them down here. Same thing with the chair. These transducers are built inside this chair in those same positions, And I'm the only person who makes sound tables and chairs with right-left stereo separation, so it matches the headphones and the light glasses. We want synchronizing of the right-left hemispheres of hearing, seeing, and the brainstem right-left areas of vibration sense to all track together, so I'm causing a grand synchronicity in neural processing centers of the brain. Everybody else designs their sound tables with one transducer up here by your head and one down by your feet. So it's a complete mismatch of transducer placement in relation to your body network, and it's a mismatch of neural processing because stereo is top-bottom instead of right-left, so it doesn't match the headphones and the light glasses. So we have a neurological mismatch of information processing, which in itself causes minor stress in the system. And if this is a stress reduction therapy, we don't want to build stress into the system by designing it wrong. Inside the brain, we have the somatosensory cortex and the motor cortex. So you can see that up here in the brain, the somatosensory is what's called the post-central gyrus. A gyrus is the noodle, and the sulcus is the groove between noodles. So this groove right here is called the central sulcus. And all the noodles that go back from that, and all the ones that go forward from that, these two big noodle zones, so to speak, is the post-central gyrus. The gyrus is the noodle. Post-central means post is behind and anterior is in front. So post-central gyrus and the pre-central gyrus has something called a homunculus, which shows the nerve distribution in various body areas and who gets the most and who gets the least. So you can see in the sensory, most of the nerve network is in the hands and fingers and the face and the lips. And in the motor cortex, it's got to do with mouth and tongue and vocal cords and face and hands, because we have our most fine dexterous information that we need to do with the hands and fingers and the face and the tongue and the lips and things like that. So basically, as we get deeper to this, we realize that when we're doing things like yoga positions, these positions are firing stretch receptors and three-dimensional positioning of Golgi tendon stretch receptors and muscle stretch receptors and joint receptors and three-dimensional balancing. We're forcing the brain into a certain set of calculations. And when we do that, this position, this full body mudra here, forces the brain to make a connection the same way that we were seeing all these different hand positions are causing something to happen in my system that's exercising an inner workout of how my body and my emotions and my mind come together and synchronize. So I'm really resynchronizing brain pathways that are important for my health by doing all these odd body positionings, full body mudras, and balancings and things like that. And all of these link to the chakras. And I talked about that. I did 3 separate, broadcasts on the chakras. So the idea that the chakras are linked with glands and linked with nerve networks. The postganglionic network of the sympathetic chain goes out through these conglomerations of nerve bundles called the postganglionic neuron bundles, and then out from there into glands. And the glands are the counterpart physically of each chakra. So each chakra has a predominant gland that goes with it, and a nerve network that goes with it, and a set of muscles that goes with each one that contract in a specific way to extract prana out of the air by controlling the intake of breath in the pranayama that is associated with each chakra. So my breathing, my respiration with each chakra is linked in with muscle groups that have to contract and control that breathing, and the muscle gland nerve network that arises in the physical body counterpart of the metaphysical spinning vortex in the etheric realm of what the chakra represents to extract prana from normal air. And from that standpoint, since I cataloged which exact muscle groups and which nerve networks are associated with each chakra, it became obvious that all of these asana positions are actually to work the specific set of muscles that you use to contract, to activate each chakra. So really you're going to an Olympics workout to muscle up those muscles that you will use to control the breath as you extract prana from the 7 chakras. You're exercising those muscle groups, and that's what these asanas are doing. Aside from the fact that they're resetting all these mechanoreceptors and creating a full body mudra whose pattern unlocks something in your brain as an experience. Triple, quadruple duty out of doing yoga. All of this is to awaken a deeper pattern recognition, a pattern that the full body mudra is revealing in the deep collective unconscious mind. These hand positions and these body positions are unlocking a pattern recognition at a deep unconscious level that unlocks an experience that you wouldn't know is there unless you help to unlock it by putting your body into these patterns and awakening this metaphysical network where we can draw in the 7 qualities of energy that's required to run all the machinery that normally sits quiescent, because we don't know we're supposed to go there. We weren't brought up in a society that naturally taught us this through our mentors and our shamans and our holy people. So that we can go places that we're here designed to be able to travel to. Our body is a mind-blowing machine whose purpose is for us to be able to travel to etheric realms, to interdimensional realms, to go places and do things that are superhuman to us now, because we believe we're ordinary, and we're not ordinary at all. There's nothing in reality that is ordinary. Everything is unimaginably extraordinary. All you have to do is peel the most superficial layer away and take a look, and you can see it's networked together in an unimaginable way. And we're here not using any of the machinery that is designed to take us into our extraordinary selves and boost our abilities into what our birthright truly is. So we lay fallow in a field. We're a field that's not tilled, that's not used. That we're a manufacturing plant where all the gears and the machinery is sitting quiet. Someplace in some back room, there's a little machine going, and that's us doing our ordinary daily lives and getting the job done in order to make a living and do our stuff. That is so minuscule. It's a tragedy that such a small, stupid little minuscule part of us is all we use, when our birthright is to be superhuman, to be beyond, to be in realms and explore places in consciousness and dimensions that we only read in science fiction films or books. It's an extraordinary place that we could be that we're not. And that's why I'm saying that now we're in a world that is completely different than the world where these systems of chakra activation and yoga posturing and breath control and all the rest, meditation, were designed for an environment that is no longer here, where the world was quiet. There was no traffic, there was no roads, there was no electricity, there was no fumes, there was no artificial. It was us and nature, and dirt roads and horses. Our bodies were designed for that. And the type of meditation and the time of pace that we had at those points, meditation was a whole different idea. We were already closer to that kind of pace that you have when you sit quietly. Now the pace of the 21st century is breakneck speed and crazy, and it activates from the second you're awakened by alarm clock to the minute you try to go to sleep with the momentum of the 21st century day. It just doesn't work anymore. It's not big enough anymore. It's not powerful. It's not enough to overcome the unimaginable levels of activity that we are forced to deal with in order to be in the 21st century. The marathon of stresses and influences, and we need more powerful tools, and we have those tools. We have scientific tools to measure. We have scientific tools to create new high-level light and sound devices that can place our brain waves into these states. Now we have to use technology to bring us to the same place that we used to be able to go to easier in the past, because our circumstances are now unimaginably different. So we need to meet that with the tools of technology. Technology itself is what's pretty much putting us here in this horrible state, and it's going to be technology that can help to save us from the technology that's destroying us as well. The idea behind the brain entrainment and the synchronicity of the hemispheres and the global mind linking, this is what we're doing here, is using 21st century tools to meet the stresses of the 21st century and overcome it. To bring us back to our full potential by exercising ourselves into this other realm and changing our perspective about things. Where we activate these chakras in a sequence, and then we activate our network with other networks, other people, and link ourselves together to increase the power to change reality itself at a quantum field. We're the ones who have that power. Power is in the tip of your fingers, the palm of your hands. We can do this. This is what it's all about. And that's what the soundtrack today is all about. So gather your headphones together. We're combining a number of different things, Epsilon and default mode network, to awaken our super being self, and to bring us closer to the moment of expanding our own self-awareness so that it becomes this in its true universal context. So here we go. Close your eyes, and here we go. Just as a little exercise to illustrate what I've been talking about. When yoga posture is standing on your head, and when you stand on your head, you keep falling over. It's very hard to stand on your head. But if you can do it successfully, there comes a point where your legs and your body are exactly over the center point of your head, and everything becomes solid, and all your muscles fall away and relax, and you're rock solid, upright, upside down. And it's easy to keep you there by minor muscle contractions to bring you back around that point that you sway around, that gravity center point. And essentially, when we're upright standing, we're standing on our heads backwards. Our bodies learn how to do it. Micro motions of muscle contractions based on the proprioception of muscle spindle stretch, Golgi tendon, position sensing in three-dimensional space. You can feel your body doing all these instantaneous mathematical calculations and sensing and sending motor signals out to keep you around this balance point by standing straight up, putting your hands by your sides, have your feet touching together, so you've narrowed the point where your balance point is, feet together, standing upright, close your eyes, and see what it feels like. You can feel your body swaying around the center point, and you can feel hundreds of little muscle contractions constantly bringing it back to the center before it gets too far, all of it happening automatically from under the hood in your brain as you stand on your head backwards. A good personal insight example of all of those proprioception mechanisms going on automatically every second of the day that you're not aware of from your own big mind. In addition, Body Mudra tells us that all of the soundtracks that you've been exposed to up to this point can be used in three different ways. One is therapeutically, laying down with headphones on, eyes closed, or in a recliner chair or something like that. Number two, with a portable device, listening to it as a background soundtrack while you do ordinary things in your day. Wash the dishes, putter around the house, go to the supermarket and shop for groceries with earbuds or headphones on with this soundtrack going. It's the soundtrack of mindfulness, a soundtrack of centering, the soundtrack of expanding, of consciousness expansion in your ordinary life. We're bringing meditation out of the meditation room into ordinary reality and transforming ordinary reality into extraordinary reality. Third is listen to these soundtracks sitting on a pillow in meditation with your legs crossed and headphones on, eyes closed. You can now access the three different types of states of consciousness associated with the full body mudra that unlocks a completely new meaning for each of these soundtracks that you now have in your collection. So that said, have a good week. Thank you all. Remember that I am doing my biotuning workshop, and that this following weekend we will not be here on Sunday, but we will be here on Monday, the next day, which is not, as I said before, February 29th. That's only on a leap year. It's track 9 3/4 of the Hogwarts Express. So we'll see you next week. Take care, be happy, healthy, and holy, and I'll see you next time.